Reflexology is a form of divination. Revelation 21:8, 22:15, King James, the word sorcerers. New International Version, those who practice magic arts. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee, and the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Neither repented they of the murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornications, nor of their thefts. For without are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers, murderers and idolaters, and whoever loveth and maketh a lie. But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and the murderers and the whoremongers and the sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. God's requirement is to give a warning. He says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. When I say to the wicked, O wicked man, you shall surely die, and you do not speak to warn the wicked to turn from his way, his blood will I require at your hand. Remember this, we showed this morning, that this association, sympathy, correspondence supposedly from the outer space, the macrocosm, with the earth and with man, is the foundation of the astrology, pantheism, nature worship, paganism. Supposedly those molecules have instant communication with all other molecules of the universe instantaneously. But man is the center. He is the leader of this. And treatment modalities is based on astrological concepts. There's correspondence, the association, the sympathy. A baby was born, and if he had a birth defect, it meant something, an omen for some future event. And so babies were looked at carefully early on as if there would be something that would be wrong with them that would tell a story. And very early on, the hand became one of the areas that was looked at. The chiromancy or the palmistry, the hand would tell the future. You heard of the people that do the palm reading. These go back ancient times. But that progressed. And so simple things that supposedly could be told, eventually many things could be told from the creases of the hand and so forth. And this type of divination continued to increase. And the body was supposed to have localized spots that at the lobe of the ear or the entire ear or the lobe or a spot between the thumb or the nail, a variety of parts were supposed to represent the entire body. So you could go to those areas and manipulate them or do certain things, and it would influence the entire person, supposedly. And here we have this Newsweek again, way back, the mind and body, talking about the science of the mind and the body. And here is a list of a lot of called somatic therapies. It has to do with touching the body or something with the body, the mind, the body, mind, spirit. Whenever you see this written, body, mind, spirit, it's usually coming from the occultic writings. Now we, in our beliefs, we believe there is the body, mind, and spirit, to make man whole. But the expression you heard, usually you see it written as dealing with the New Age, the writings relevant to health. So here listed a lot of the practices that would be body, mind, and I'm not going to read all of them, but we have reflexology as one of them. You see there, Tai Chi, yoga therapy, Kundalini, and so forth. A whole lot of variety of things, the martial arts. Let's go on. William Fitzgerald in 1913, an ear, nose, throat specialist back in, I think it was in Massachusetts. He was a follower of Swedenborg. Swedenborg was a great occultist from late 1700s, early 1800s. And he had quite a following, still does. But he was the great influence in those ages in spiritualism. And so this Dr. Fitzgerald was a follower of him, so he knew about all of this type of thing and the different supposedly spots on the body that had energy flowing and so forth. And he began to try to find some places he could press and make pressure and make anesthesia for doing ear, nose, throat surgery, local anesthesia. Well, when you're tied into the cult and you want to find something that follows that, it's amazing what might happen. And so he used these pressure points for local anesthesia. He could do some surgery without pain. And he proceeded then with a theory and to map a map of correspondence. He said the body has 5 zones on this side, 5 zones on this side, and anything that's at the hand on this side will deal with any of the organs on this side, and this hand, of course, the opposite side or the bottom of the foot. And the theory was that you could feel this hand or you feel the feet, and you could detect disease in the past or the future, or if it's there presently, by rubbing, massaging, you could cure disease. Now, sometimes when you only got one organ, which side deals with it, that was a little hard to solve, but they didn't worry about that. And it became known as zone therapy. Now, the doctors didn't pick it up. One other doctor did, but the doctors in this area wouldn't have anything to do with it. But it got into the lay people, and that's where it began to spread. Eunice Ingham began to map out what she felt was the locations on the feet or the hands that were tied to the organs of the body. And it was called zone therapy. But when it got to England, and this now is worldwide, got to England, Doreen Bailey called it reflexology, and that's the name that sticks. Massage to the feet or to the hands. This was real popular in our church. I was presenting this back in Ohio at a mini camp meeting some years ago. There was a lady sitting up front. Everything I was presenting, it was rah. She was right with me. But boy, was there a change when I hit this subject. Wow. I saw an expression that I've seen before, and it's the devil's expression. She was angry. And she was a reflexologist. And fortunately, there was another doctor sitting on that row that believed I did, and he took up the contest with her, and I got out of it. So I was all right. But let's go a little further in it. Here's a picture of supposedly the mapped out hands and the feet, and you can rub those areas and cure problems. If you've got cirrhosis of the liver, you rub there. But it doesn't fit in any science of any sort. And if you have internal organs, so forth. In the New Age dictionary, it has a list of a name of a lady in the United States that has promulgated this and kept it alive through the years. She's a member of a local Seventh-day Adventist church, not in my town, but a nearby town, and she's still teaching it there. 1998, she was one of them producing the women's ministry at the church and promoting this particular thing, and she gave me a book at that time. She wanted to do it on me, but I wouldn't do it. Another friend of mine who was an engineer sitting, and he and I both understood this, so we wouldn't have anything to do. We kept our mouths shut then because there was other people. There wasn't a time to embarrass people or anything, and so we just kept our mouths shut, and I wrote a letter to them later, helping to hope that they would see it. But in this New Age dictionary, she's listed as the promulgator of it in the country at this time. And a doctor that goes to that church told me recently that it was still ongoing there. Okay, William Jarvis is the name we were trying to think of, John. This doctor was a professor at Loma Linda. He taught other doctors, taught them how to do scientific testing. He was teaching scientists how to do testing. He was not a member of a church, but he was famous across our country among the medical profession as exposing quackery and things that don't work. So he had this class of scientists he was teaching how to do research. So he brings in a person that's a reflexologist, earns his living rubbing the feet and curing disease. He brings him into the class and he has him present the philosophy. And then he challenges his students to design a test that can test this for its reality or not. So what they did, they took 70 people with known disease, proven disease by other physicians and laboratory and so forth, testing x-rays. And they brought them in, put them on a table, covered a sheet over them so there was no eye contact, no visual contact, and no auditory contact between examiner and the patient. 70 people. And at the end of the time, the examiner listed the different diseases he felt he had found and so forth on these people. This was a blind test, but the results were not as good as guessing. And so the reflexologist, he decides, okay, that proves what I'm doing isn't science. He quits. He does foot massage, but he makes more and more proclamations as to what it does. And that's unusual for that step. You can find this on the internet. That's where I got this part, but it was done at Loma Linda University. The results no better than guessing. He, Satan, has transformed himself into an angel of light and is deceiving thousands and leading them captive. The advantage he takes of the science of human mind is tremendous. The science of phrenology, psychology, and mesmerism are the channel through which he comes more directly to this generation, that was her time, and works with that power which is to characterize his efforts near the close of probation. Phrenology, the feeling of the head, telling the personality, rubbing on certain bumps can change the personality, so forth. We went through that, was it this morning or earlier, or sometime today. All right. Yes. There's the machine. You put a cap on the head and makes pressure on the points. Interesting from this is where a pressure point on the head supposedly could change things in the brain and its function. Shortly thereafter, while this was popular, not among doctors, but among lay people, this didn't go well through the medical science. Began a doctor, an osteopathic doctor, came up with the theory that inside the body, the spinal fluid and the fluid around the brain, by its circulation, made the body well, and if it stopped good circulation, it would create all disease. And this was called craniosacral therapy. And by a little gentle touch on the brain, around the neck, or on the sacral area, you could correct the flow of the spinal fluid. It's pretty popular. In fact, it got as one of the components of osteopathic medicine in their schools. And how did they prove this? It comes that one person comes up with it. Well, he started out at the time when the phrenology was popular, believed among some of those. And so he began to tie belts around his head in different positions to see what reaction he'd have. Sometimes he was nauseated, sometimes he felt better. And he continued this, and eventually he came up with this theory that the bones of the skull don't really knit and become solid. They can be moved, and all disease is caused by the poor circulation of the spinal fluid. And by pressing gently, you can move the bones and you can change the movement of the spinal fluid and cure disease. Not done by testing by scientists, by people around the world. One person comes up with this. And people grab it and goes like hotcakes. No proof whatsoever. Totally nonsense in our judgment. Okay. So then eventually this gets into what we call the craniosacral therapy, which becomes popular. And this was what was happening in 2007 in a church in your conference here, where the pastor and his wife were doing this in the church. And that's when that convention at the weekend conference office was called to help share the understanding with the rest of the people in the conference that this wasn't so good. And those things, and as I mentioned one time here that I read this book that said the students at Battle Creek, Michigan College on Saturday nights would practice phrenology as kind of their sports or their entertainment for the evening. And I don't know how they did it, but that was an interesting book. It was on the history of John Kellogg, as I believe. All right, we saw this earlier, the cranial sacral therapy by William Sutherland, an osteopathic physician, and it was presented to the public in 1929. The concept that the brain has rhythmic motion, that every minute 10 to 12 pulsations will occur. Well, the spinal fluid, when you have the spine open, you will see pulsations, but it's when the heart beats. And it's when the vessels alongside shed their impulse, because the arteries will have an impulse that goes down. You can see it occur, but the spinal fluid has some motion, but that has nothing to do with causing these diseases. That was totally taken out of the air, and people believed it and accepted it, and it caused the split of a church in your conference. The concept that the brain has this rhythmic motion, resulting in the motion of the skull bones, which is detected by fingertips placed on the head or on the sacrum. The pulsation of the brain is transmitted through the fluid, supposedly here. So we don't want to spend too much time on it, but the theory that all disease originated from that. Well, and you could correct it by pressing around the head. I had a nephew that went to this healer in Wenatchee, and he had a shoulder in trouble, and he could feel heat and movement down through his shoulder as the craniosacral therapist began to give him treatment. Just by touching gently there, he could feel the deep heat. He didn't understand what it was till he got home, and his father shared with him what I had shared with him, and so he didn't go back. But this was more than something simple. Sometimes really great things happened, but it was an occultic power for sure. Now eventually Dr. Sutherland discovered that a power within produced the same results and could be achieved without the use of any external force. He called that the breath of life. So it was a mental act now that he could manipulate it rather than a physical act. Thereafter, his theory focus was that spiritual reverence, he would deal with it. Let's go to REIKI. How many have heard the word REIKI? Okay, then there's quite a few that have not. This is something right now, when I originally put this together, there was 1.5 million practitioners treating, probably 2 million at this point. This is deep, deep into the occult. You're not manipulating, and supposedly in this therapy, you're not balancing energy, you're taking energy out of the cosmos and transmitting it through your hands to the individual. This energy can go any place in the body, doesn't have to have a diagnosis. It'll find the place to correct whatever is in problems. Now the REIKI practitioners have to be initiated into the occult to be involved in this. So the probable origin is out of Tibet. Dr. Mikao Usai introduced it to Japan in 1922, and from there it came to the United States. And it has level 1, 2, and 3 in its application. But attunement or initiation has to be done to receive it. And it can be done healing at a distance, even with the other person not asking for it if the healer wants to do it. There are symbols involved that gives more power to it. It's really deep into the occult. It transmits energy, not a balancing. A light touch with the hands transmits the energy, or you can do it without a touch. Do it by your mind. And it's supposedly the energy being transmitted has intelligence. It has a divine source. It's a shamanistic. It's like a shaman would do, which means spirit treatment. Connects with the spirit world. And we have this millions. 2 years ago, I was doing a seminar at camp meeting in one of the conferences in Canada. And in the front row was a man that was practicing this, one of our members. I had been invited there because his daughter was in charge of who came, and I was invited, and she hoping that he would gain something from exposing it. I don't think we made a dent. But this is widespread across this country, and you read the books of those doing it, and they said in these books, sometimes they'll see the ghost stand beside them or behind them. They'll see sparks come out of the end of their fingers from this energy. It's really deep into the occultic. Have nothing to do with it. Satanic agents claim to cure disease. They attribute their power to electricity, magnetism. Oh, stay out of the magnets. and so-called sympathetic remedies, while in truth they are but channels of Satan's electric currents. By this means he casts his spell over the bodies and souls of men. We are coming right upon the time when Satan is to work with all manner of bewitching influences, and those who are charmed with them now, or give them the least countenance now, will be all ready to be swept in to act a part with the devil then. That's quite a statement, isn't it? Let's look at it again so we don't forget it. Satan is to work with all manner of bewitching influence, and those who are charmed with them now, or give them the least countenance now, will be ready to be swept right in to act a part with the devil then, the final events. So that says, if I look to utilize these, learn something, so to use them for myself, I've given my will a bit to even investigate them, not to expose them, but to investigate, that I am now under the influence. I may not feel it, may not realize it, but when the time comes to make a choice, I may not have the angel to help me make my choice. He may let us be. We need not be deceived. Wonderful scenes with which Satan will be closely connected will soon take place. God's word declares that Satan will work miracles. Remember, whether you get better or not, a test of what happens is never used to judge as the source of the power. If you had a miracle and it's done by Satan because you got well, oh, that's God-given. No, you can't use the end result to make the judgment. You use the scriptures. What is its base? What is its background? What does it teach? What does it come from? He will make people sick and suddenly remove from them his satanic power. They will then be regarded as healed. These works of apparent healing will bring Seventh-day Adventists to the test. Many who have had great light will fail to walk in the light because they have not become one with Christ. Trust in a Creator God to sustain us. All right, let me take us to we got 5 o'clock. One I want to be sure and give, I'm going to go to, and it's, is it compatible with atonement? Are these therapies, are these theories and philosophies that we're listening to, are they compatible with the atonement?